All right, looks like we're live on Facebook. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another a special segment of the Late Night Show with Dr. Kojo. We have a special guest here, Dr. Sue Varma. She is the author of Practical Optimism. It's her new book. It just came out this week, so I will allow her to talk about it. We'll go ahead and get started. But before you talk about the book, Dr. Sue, could you let us know a little bit about who you are and what you do and what you stand for?
Yes, thank you so much. So I am a psychiatrist. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a clinical educator. I work with patients, and I have a private practice where I do cognitive behavioral therapy, couples therapy, medication management. But really, I want to say, my focus is on now exceptional mental wellness and practical optimism. I started my career 20 years ago. I was in training when 9/11 happened. When I finished my training, I got recruited to be the medical director of a wonderful program that was helping folks who were, coming out of that. And I learned a lot about resilience. And then I, got really interested in optimism, which is a part of resilience. But optimism, no one ever looked at it. They were like, yeah, you're either born with this half glass, half empty, glass half full idea. And it was only later that we realized that we can actually change the way we look. And when we change the way we look at things, the things change themselves. So that mindset is something I really became interested in for achieving anything.
That's amazing. And when people hear the phrase, the word psychiatrist, they think about, oh, I'm going to get my medications refilled. So when it comes to optimism, you mentioned something about CBT earlier. Do you have
Yes.
a lot of patients who are surprised that you like to spend so much time on the therapy side of things?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question because totally everyone, two things come to mind. Number one, psychiatrists only crazy. That's the word they have in their mind. You had to be crazy to go see a psychiatrist, right? And I hate
Right.
that because I'm like, yeah, that's not true. And we really need to invest in prevention, right? Like, let's not let the other shoe drop. Why do we wait so long? Why don't we have more screenings and checkups like the way we do to go see our doctor annually? And
Right.
then the therapy part, because to tell you the truth, I had to go through my own therapy, and I was in my training, and they tell everyone when you're training to be a psychiatrist, go, go, go to be trained as a therapist. And they didn't have the time. We didn't have the money, right? We were working 100 hours a week. We're all in medical student loan debt. I had to pay for college myself, medical school myself.
It's a
So I
lot.
was like, who's got time for New York City expensive psychiatrists? And then we had a therapist, cognitive behavioral therapist came in, and it was so great because he was talking about tips and tools and resources like that you could go maybe 4 times, 6 times, 8 times, of course, depending on what you went for, and
Right.
that you could change your mindset. And I was like, great, sign me up. And it changed my life because at that time my mom was getting diagnosed with cancer and she couldn't get treatment because she had all these other heart problems and underlying conditions. And all of that was causing a lot of physical stress. And it was coming out in the way of my legs were weak and physical symptoms. So I always say the body expresses what the mind cannot. And that's
Mm,
why it's really
I-
important to real time process your emotions. So I became a huge fan of cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was like, when I finish my training, sure, I'm going to help people. I'm going to prescribe medication in very select cases, thoughtfully, carefully, if needed, because medications can be life saving and life changing. But so can the skills and the tools that stay with you for life. People don't understand. I find medication and I prescribe it in select cases when I carefully do an evaluation and I feel like it's very necessary. But otherwise, I say to people, hey, we've got so many other tools that I can help you with. That expression, when all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail. It's this
right.
idea that if that's all they do, then they're going to be like, oh, I think you need an antidepressant. And I'm like, okay, well, what about looking at their friendships, looking at their job stress, looking
Right.
at their partner relationships? Let's get to the source. Because if you're not getting to the source, you're going to keep continuing medication or no medication. Medication takes, as you know, 6 to 8 to 12 weeks to work. And then if you stop it, you go back to where you were. So I want to give people tools and resources. So it's a good question. The optimism is the last thing you associate with a
Right.
psychiatrist, right?
Right. And the timing of the release of the book is so interesting because we're headed into 2024. The statistics are out in terms of inflation, depression is up, substance use is up. So, what is there to be optimistic about from a practical standpoint at a time like this?
Absolutely. People ask me that question and they're like, it's almost like it's funny. It's not like they're saying it, but they're like, how dare you talk about optimism, right? Like our world is on fire. There's war and like climate change and coming out on of the pandemic, and then everything that you mentioned, mental health crisis. And so my argument is we need this book now more than ever. And
Right.
the key thing about this is we're not talking about toxic positivity, right? Like rah rah, just look on the bright side, right? Because that would be dismissive. We want to validate people's experience. And I've spent so much time on this author's note, which is the first 3 pages. And I say, I give you context. I hear you, I see you. All of us are going to have grief, loss, disappointment in our life, 100%, right? And some of you are going to think, like, she's crazy for telling me to be optimistic. But what I'm saying is, anything you want. I have 8 pillars of practical optimism. They start from having a purpose, whether it's in life or being very intentional. They end with having practicing healthy habits. They're the 8 Ps. Any problem you have in life, run it through a system, right? Think of it as like a system, a filtration system. And I give you all very tangible tips and techniques so that you can start with a problem, get clarity, ask really good questions, increase your motivation, whether it's through exercise. Exercise boosts a sense of purpose in life, whatever it might be. And whatever problem you have, use these 8 Ps. But the key is it's a practice, right? Like a yoga, like learning a new language, a sport. No one's going to be trying to doing, jump shots or whatever the equivalent in sports athletics is. I got 2 boys and they're big basketball fans, football fans, and their kids, and they practice day in, day out, and I'm like, that's what practical optimism is. I have to practice it every day.
Correct. And for the people who are right now struggling with mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, who are stuck, what would be the most practical beginning thing to do? Because you mentioned exercise and a lot of great things that you said just now. But for somebody who is stuck and they just happen to be watching this,
Yes.
where would they start?
Yeah. So first of all, know you're not alone. And if you need mental health treatment, please, by all means, right? Because practical optimism isn't going to replace the careful, evaluation of a medical provider, behavioral health provider, right? And a simple place to start if you're feeling really like down is if you have a primary care doctor, just to schedule a visit just for your mental health. Like just say, listen, that's all I want to talk about. Because a lot of times you go to see your provider, they're looking at your cholesterol and all that. They don't have time for that. So this isn't going to replace it. This is in addition to, if you're struggling right now. 4 simple key habits. I was in a situation back in April 2020, April 2020, height of the pandemic, the death toll in New York City was rising, and I got a call from Global Citizen, and they're like, we're going to do a program. Lady Gaga, World Health Organization, the UN, Jimmy Fallon, all the late night show hosts, and Oprah, and all these fancy people are going to be on it. I was like, okay, great. I'll be at home. I'll be watching. They're like, no. We want you to speak. And I was like, I don't sing, I don't dance. What do you want me to do? or not very well. Let's put it that way, right? I try to salsa dance, but not very well. And they were like, we give us hope. Exactly the same question you're asking. What can you do to help someone right now who's feeling really down and alone? And I said, okay, great. How long do I have? Because they're like, give us hope, give us inspiration, give us tips. I'm like, do I have an hour? They're like, no. You got 59 seconds, girl. And I was like, 59 seconds? What do you want me to talk about? So I said, okay, what am I doing in my life? And my dad is a psychiatrist. He's retired. I called him up whenever I got a problem. I was like, Dad, what would you do? And my mom, who's passed, I was like, what would mom do? And he's like, Sue, it only takes a second, or a few seconds to save someone's life. And that's all he said. And I was like, oh, he's like the Yoda. I got to go deep. Okay. So,
That's profound.
so I was like, okay, what can I say in a minute that would matter? And so here goes. The 4 M's of mental health. I want you to every single day prioritize this as if your life depended on it, right? Because it does. And these 4 M's are simple science-backed habits, 10 minutes a day. Movement, whatever that looks like for you. It could be literally walking around the block. It could be doing a weight in your home. It could be a yoga mat. It could be stretching, but you have to move your body. The other thing is mindfulness. Mindfulness can be meditation. It could literally just be dishwashing, watching your show, listening, got a podcast on or something, but try to do something single-mindedly, whatever you're doing. Then my favorite, meaningful connection. And this is going deep. This is showing your vulnerability, saying, you know what, I'm down and out. Things are not working. Can I vent to you? You got 15 minutes for me? And then read the room, but go deep, be authentic, put the phones away. And also supplement the deep conversations with the lighter social snacking. You see someone at the water cooler at work, you see someone at the elevator. I'm really big on this, making eye contact, smiling with strangers, the small talk goes such a long way. And the last one is called mastery. And I love this because you don't have to be a master to experience mastery. This can be experiencing a state of flow, kind of lose track of time, the pottery, the gardening. For me, it's the bad salsa dancing. Again, don't have to be a master to experience mastery. And to be honest with you, so much of that music, I remember during medical school, we were working day and night, gross anatomy lab, and music really, like once a week I was able to, like, go to a salsa dancing lesson at 7 p.m. and listening to, Mark Anthony, or I don't know, Julio, no, Enrique Iglesias, like all these fabulous, whoever was in at the time,
The
like,
throwbacks, yeah.
yeah, the 20 years ago. But anyway, you don't have to be a master, and that master to experience mastery, and whatever gives you flow, golf, whatever sport, do it. Because one question I always ask people, what do you love to do in life, and when's the last time you did it?
I love that. I love that. What do you like to do in life, and what's the last time that you did it?
Yes.
That's amazing. So we had movement, we had mindfulness, then we had meaningful connections, and then we had
Yes.
mastery.
Exactly, the 4 M's of mental health. And make a little note from this, put it in your phone if you have it, write it on a piece of paper, stick it on your fridge, and in like a prescription. Like back in the day before we went to digital, prescribing, e-prescribing, I would write it on a prescription pad,
Right. I
you
remember
know,
that those
like
days.
it was an exercise. And they would be like, oh my, because again, like from the psychiatrist, they're like, oh, you're gonna give me a medication, and then they're like, oh no, there's something else. And I have really bad handwriting, notoriously, so as a lot of doctors do. So they were like, what is this chicken scratch? But 10 minutes a day, 4 habits. So it could be, if you're lucky and you got 40 minutes, great. If not, spread the 4 M's throughout the week. But if you can do one face-to-face contact, like this counts, right? Like video chat, if you can meet in person. But don't forget to go deep, right? Because then a lot of times we're kind of, got the mask on and everything's great and look at me. And saw something really interesting. It was talking about how millennials are very invested in looking rich to other people, and I was
Mm,
just thinking
yeah.
how everyone is always keeping up. But it was very interesting that they were calling out, a particular generation for being more so. So just to be mindful that we're all invested in our image, and it's human nature. But it's
Mhm.
okay to be like, "Nah, I'm not doing well." And I
Right.
love your
Be
authenticity because you're so,
vulnerable.
yeah, be vulnerable. And I love how you are so kind of open and vulnerable, and you kind of open, like, normalize and level the playing field, because people are watching you and they're like, "Okay, he's doing great things." And at the same time, he's very open about his life and what he's been through. So I think that's really reassuring and comforting, and gives permission for people to open. There's a saying, compassionate listening is giving the other person permission to empty what's in their heart.
That's so deep. And for me, when I share what I'm going through, like you say, it gives people permission to connect with you, because maybe they see what, Instagram portrays, but then you're not able to really connect on a human level when we just post highlight after highlight. The
Totally.
struggles the struggles are a better catalyst for a deeper and meaningful conversation, wouldn't you say?
Totally, absolutely. And I have to say, some of my closest friendships have come out of hardship. And that may seem so odd, but I can tell you, if you want to accelerate a friendship, start opening up to the person. Of course, we want to be mindful of what that other person's bandwidth is. So that's where sort of asking them, is it okay? And then once you're talking, I would say 15 minutes is kind of the sweet spot, when if you're venting and the other person's not interested or doesn't have the bandwidth, you want to be respectful.
Right.
But at the same time, you have to go deep, and you have to
Agreed.
be open again. And those friendships that I've made, I always joke about how certain life experiences, whether, I don't know, it's the military and boot camp or boarding school or medical school, grad school, like they bond you. Hardship really connects all of us.
I completely agree, and I would say the same. I've built so many meaningful connections based off of a place of, feeling empty or lonely, or just a more genuine expression of yourself. I
Yes.
completely agree.
And there's something really so beautiful. Like last night, I was telling you that I had a book launch event, and some of my dear friends like flew from all over the country, and it was so, and even from like Central America, like random places.
Wow.
A friend had come in from Mexico, one from LA, one from Chicago, and they knew that I'm in the middle of this book tour. I don't have a lot of time to hang out before, after. They were so understanding, and they were like, what do you need us to do? And they were like running around, I was mentioning it was like sold out, standing room only. It was like a cold February New York City night. And
That's
I was like,
awesome.
no one's going to come. It's President's Day week. So many of my friends were out of town traveling, but it meant so much that I had friends and supporters. And, I don't give myself permission so much to celebrate, to take in the good. It's just like I was raised, work, head down, humble. And to be able to take in the love, to let people do nice things for you, to show the support, it validates all the things that you're doing when you're putting yourself out there to help other people. So the kindness and the generosity that you get back, allow yourself to be vulnerable. And I went deep in this book, in the first chapter of this book. Man, my friends are like, yeah, you put it all out there. Like, you're breaking down. You sure, Sue? You want it out there?
Because people see psychiatrists, but they don't see a human. So I
Mhm.
like the fact that you start off with vulnerability, because when you start off that way, it gives people permission to say, okay, this is a human being I'm talking to.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny, this was so random, but some of my, we were taught, at least back when I was training, that, as a psychiatrist, you're supposed to like have a wall, not a wall up, but you're supposed to be a blank slate for your patients.
Right.
You're not supposed to say so much about yourself. And I can't tell you, when I meet people in a social context and I put it all out there. Like, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that. They feel like they're my friend. And then they're like, oh, you're like a normal person and I could be friends with you. And by the way, can I be your patient? And I'm like taken back because I was like, my whole life now. And
Right.
we can't go there now, you know? But for them, they feel so comfortable and they're like, "Oh, this is the person I want, who I can relate to." And, so it's different. Things are changing because when I was training, we didn't have social media, like it was.
It's very new, that people don't realize that this is really new for us to express ourselves like this. Very
Yes.
new.
Yes.
And I have one question for you, but before I ask that question, somebody in the audience has a question. So we have two more questions for Dr. Sue Varma tonight. Jordan Lindsay says, any advice on how to help middle schoolers with practical optimism? A school-based therapist here.
Oh, I love that. So I would say depends because my one of my older kid is going into middle school and like he's like, okay, let's talk about optimism, but it's very surface level at this point. And it's like, okay, help me understand, what are we talking about here? And it's just like, what, it's positive thinking backed by positive action, right? And that's the big thing. And I have a chapter on proficiency, which is basically self-efficacy, and it's this idea that we just try. Sometimes you have to put the cart before the horse. You may have been told you're not good at something. Math, I'm not a math person. I'm not a science person. That's nonsense. Yes, certain people may gravitate towards certain things. They may come easier, but I can attest from personal experience of someone who, yes, sciences were better, easier for me, and the English, but the math, calculus, oh, over my head. Physics, over my head, right? Organic
Right.
chemistry somehow I got, but through great difficulty. And then I ended up tutoring it. But I had a professor who was like, girls don't understand this, that no girl's ever gotten an A in organic chemistry. And in 30 years, they don't have the visual spatial reasoning. And me and two of my girlfriends, we were like, but we got to go to med school. This is going to be the hump. And we studied and we got help. And then we ended up getting an A the first time in like 30 years. So, and then we
Wow.
ended up tutoring the class. So don't let anyone tell you you don't have the ability to do X, Y, and Z. You be your own determiner of that. And the way you do it is by getting help, by asking for help, by rolling up your sleeves and really being committed and dedicated, to be like, I'm going to fight this, but you have to want it. And I think a little bit of struggle for kids, my parents were like, yeah, you want to be a doctor, you go pay for it, and it's so funny because
Right.
they were like, good for you. And I was like, nowadays parents would do anything if their kids wanted to pursue
Yeah.
higher education. And they often, to their kids' detriment, are trying to always bail them out, I feel like, so I think
Yeah,
parents have
I
to
see
be
that a
careful.
lot.
Yeah. Let your kid fall a little bit. We're not talking about big safety things, but letting them experience the natural consequences within reason, within safety, within boundaries, so that they experience it. Don't take out too many hardships out of their life. I see a lot of young people, they're no longer doing chores at home because they're working. I mean, they're doing jobs around they're doing like sports around the clock. They're studying around the clock. And there's something to be said about chores in the home and also the idea of having a regular old job, like when
Yeah.
we were growing up, you did a minimum wage job and that builds character and that builds grit because I also talk to a lot of high schoolers And what they're just like, we have so much pressure. Everyone just wants us to go to an Ivy League. We don't even care to go to the Ivy League. It's the parents, the teachers, and the coaches, and we're getting it from all ends. This pressure. We have nowhere to go. We don't see our friends anymore. We know that young people only see each other 40 minutes a day, like outside of school, because they're so busy. And then they're filling the time with social media, 8 hours, 9 hours. We know that the frontal cortex thins after like 7 hours. It's over time, so there's brain changes with extensive social media use. Why? Because you're not exercising, you're not sleeping, you're not having that meaningful connection. So we have to look at everything in context. A little bit of hardship is good within reason. Play, letting young people be young people without the pressures to achieve, to succeed, because that's where I think our society is headed downwards, is the emphasis on everything material, the accolades, instead of humanity, kindness, that kind of stuff.
And I love that. This is why people need to get the book, because you're saying practical things. You're not giving people, what they want to hear. Like, oh, no, it's okay. Or like, no, your child's struggling. In order for a child to reach that self-efficacy that you mentioned, they're going to have to stumble and fail. Of course, not with
Yes.
like the huge things, but
Yes.
they have to be able to have that resiliency. I
Yes.
love that you touched on that.
Yes, because in the end, that long-term grit, but when you look at success, it's related to intrinsic motivation, right? And it's like you can't feed that to somebody. They have to have that fire burn in them. And it was very interesting, actually. My husband shares an interesting story. He's also a child of immigrant parents, and he said, Sue, I remember in the 5th grade, my dad told me, if you want anything financially, you're going to have to earn it. I'm not giving it to you. And he's like, that lit the fire under, like, he was always a good student, but then it was like, I know somebody would be like, oh my God, he's 10, why are you scaring him? That's what our generation of parents would say, right? But back then they were just like, yeah, we gotta scare you, and it scared him straight, and then he, was on this straight path after that.
Right. And then he met you, and look where he's at. So
Yeah. There you go.
it's important to have that fire within you.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
my final question for you is: throughout this whole book writing process, and with the launch that has happened this week, what have you learned about yourself or about the world?
Oh my God, so many things. I mean, that's such a great question. I learned how much kindness there is. And I learned that I have to give myself grace, because I know that we all have these narratives and we all have these scripts that, like, we have to do certain things a certain way. I learned how much pressure I put on myself. I also learned the importance of rest, which I look forward to at some point in the future. But, I realized that you have to be a little obsessed to write a book. I've been
Yeah.
writing this for years. There was so much research that went into it. There were so many sacrifices, like not being able to spend the time with the family or friends, personal goals. So a lot of things had to go on the back burner. But my parents were sort of very mission driven people, community, society, doing a lot for other people. So then I was like, you know what? I have to give it up to God, to higher power, because I felt called to write this book. It wasn't something, I was like, I'm already on television. I'm good. I don't need more, name or status. Like, I get to be a little creative, and then I go back to my practice and my family and my friends. I didn't need to write this book. This was something drawing me. So I would give advice to people, if I were to say, allow yourself to be compelled by something outside of yourself with a greater good for society, for your community, because really in the end, that's what's going to sustain you. I talk a lot about the benefits of volunteering in the first chapter and purpose. So allow yourself to be driven, but also take breaks. So that's what I have to remind myself, that, I gotta recharge, and I gotta make time for that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
And
you.
it's amazing to have watched, the progress of this book, and when you let me know that you're going to release it, and just setting this up. And it's great to now know you as a friend. I'm rooting for you,
Thank
and
you.
I have so much respect, because I know how much time it takes to this whole process is truly an undertaking. So I have so much respect for you, as a
Thank,
mother, as a wife, as a psychiatrist, as a human being, because I
thank
feel
you.
like we're connected on a really personal level, not with accolades, just two people who
Yes,
want to bring good into the world. So thank
thank
you so
you.
much for this book, and thank you for
And
your time.
Thank you so much. And for you and all the advocacy and the hard work, because I know you're creative and you keep it fun and you keep it real. So, like, thank you for lending your expertise and your platform to this book tonight and your time. So, thank
I
you.
appreciate you. Thank you so much. That's Dr. Sue Varma, ladies and gentlemen. The book is called Practical Optimism and is out now. Where can we find the book? I know on Amazon, but where else?
Yes, anywhere books are sold, Barnes and Nobles, Penguin Random House, you name it, your local independent bookstore. So the best thing I can ask, if people can leave a review, buy the book and leave a review, that would mean the world, because the reviews, that's how we all do business these days, right? Like, are we going to buy it? And this really, I think of you taking care of your mental health, you showing up here, all of your community members and supporters. This is a vital act of public service. So please take care of yourselves, take care of your communities. You know, everybody's in sort of a dire situation. They're looking to one another. And I think of this book, Practical Optimism, almost as a mental health first aid, right? So just think,
Oh, I like
whether
that.
it's young people, you got a high schooler, you got a middle schooler, you know, the college student, the young 20s, 30s. You know, last night they asked me, who is this book written for? And I was like, the question to ask is, who is this book not written for? Because I
Right.
work with people throughout the life cycle, you know, from like 16 to 86. So really anybody can welcome and embrace the practice of practical optimism. And they can find me, you know, on Instagram, my website, drsuvarma.com. So thank you so much. Like, I learned so much from you and inspired by you. So I'm glad that we had an excuse, because I would have wanted to talk to you anyway, but the book gave us an excuse to.
I appreciate that. And also for the people in my community, Val said that she was grocery shopping. I know this is a different time that we're doing the stream, but all the streams are going to be available on Facebook and on YouTube. And we will take clips from this and throw us on YouTube, and I'll put it on Instagram. So even if you missed the live streaming, I'll make sure to put it in your face.
Awesome. Thank you. And please collaborate. If you end up doing reels, I would love to do that with you on Instagram.
That's a good idea. We will do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
We will
Okay,
do
great.
that. Yes,
Awesome.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
So
your
nice
time.
to see you, Dr. Koda. Thank you. Take care.
Likewise. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thank you. You too.